Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. The reunion had been planned for months, a grand spectacle to bring together distant relatives and celebrate decades of family ties. The air buzzed with laughter, children darted between tables, and the scent of barbecue lingered in the summer evening. It was the kind of event where everyone tried just a little too hard to look happy, and for most of the evening, I played my part perfectly. Veronica was radiant in a blue dress that matched her eyes, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders in loose waves. She moved with the effortless grace that had always drawn me to her, and as I watched her, I felt a swell of pride. We looked good together, and for a while, I almost believed we were still that perfect couple. "James, darling, you should try this wine," Veronica called, holding up a bottle. Her speech was already a touch slurred, but I laughed it off. She'd been working long hours at her new job, and if tonight was a chance to unwind, who was I to deny her that? I walked over and took the glass from her hand, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek. "Maybe slow down a bit," I teased. "You don't want to be the one dancing on tables tonight, do you?" She gave me a playful shove. "Oh, come on. It's a party." As the night wore on, more relatives arrived, and the wine flowed freely. I found myself caught up in conversations with uncles I hadn't seen in years, discussing everything from the stock market to the latest football scores. That's when Thomas, my cousin, made his entrance. The life of every party, he strutted in with his arm around his latest girlfriend, wearing that easy smile of his that everyone seemed to love. "James," he called out, clapping me on the back. "Still pretending you can keep up with us younger guys?" "Only where it counts," I replied with a grin, though I felt a twinge of annoyance. Thomas always had a way of making everything about himself. He leaned in, and for a second, I caught a whiff of cologne that was far too expensive for someone who was perpetually between jobs. Veronica, however, seemed delighted to see him. "Tommy," she squealed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You came." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," he replied, flashing her that same infuriating grin. Hours passed, and I started to notice that they were spending more time together than seemed appropriate. Thomas's hand would linger a little too long on her back, and Veronica's laughter became more frequent, more forced, as if she were trying to cover something up. I felt a knot form in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. This was my wife, after all. I had to trust her, didn't I? Then, it happened. Everyone. Veronica's voice cut through the chatter, and the room fell silent. She stood, swaying slightly, holding her wine glass high above her head. "I have a confession to make." I felt my heart skip a beat. This wasn't part of the plan. "Veronica, maybe we should," I began, but she waved me off. No, this is important." She turned to Thomas, and I saw something flash between them, something that made my blood run cold. "You see, James, darling, there's something I've been meaning to tell you for a while now." Her eyes were glassy, her cheeks flushed. "Veronica," I warned, my voice low, but she just laughed. "Oh, come on, let's not be coy. We're all family here." She took a shaky step toward me, her smile widening. "James, I've been sleeping with Thomas." You could have heard a pin drop. The words hung in the air like a slap, the kind that leaves a mark long after it's done. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just stood there, staring at my wife, waiting for her to take it back. But she didn't. She just kept smiling, that drunken, half-crazed smile, as if this were all some elaborate joke. "You, what?" I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "You heard me," she said, shrugging as if she'd just confessed to cheating at cards. "Tommy and I have been having a little fun, that's all." "You're drunk," I said, shaking my head. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Veronica snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "You've been so busy with work, with your perfect little life, that you didn't even notice, did you?" "Veronica, stop," Thomas cut in, but she waved him off. "Why should I? It's the truth." Isn't that what reunions are for? Airing out all the family secrets. Are you out of your goddamn mind? I roared, my voice louder than I intended. You think this is some kind of joke? No, James, it's not a joke, she said, her expression sobering. It's just the truth. I turned to Thomas, who stood there, looking more like a deer caught in headlights than the cocky man who'd strutted in earlier. Is this true? I demanded. James, he faltered, and in that moment, I saw it. The guilt. The shame. The truth I had refused to see for months. You son of a bitch, I spat, lunging at him. It took two of my uncles to pull me away, and even then, I could barely breathe. My chest heaved, my vision blurred, and all I could hear was Veronica's laughter, not joyful, but bitter, broken, the sound of someone who had given up on pretending. I wrenched myself free and turned to face her one last time. Why? I asked, my voice cracking. Because you weren't there, she said simply, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. You were never there. I stared at her, feeling something inside me break. We're done, I whispered, and without another word, I walked out of the house, leaving behind the sounds of a family that would never be whole again. I barely remember driving home that night, the echoes of Veronica's confession still bouncing around in my head, refusing to let me rest. Every laugh, every touch, every whispered promise we'd ever shared felt like a lie, crumbling in the wake of her drunken admission. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with the image of Thomas's smug face and Veronica's cold, unapologetic eyes. The next morning, I woke up with a single thought running through my mind: I can't let them get away with this. It wasn't just about the affair, it was about the humiliation, the audacity to tear apart my life in front of my family without a hint of remorse. I needed to do something, anything, to take back control. And that's when I thought of Sarah. Sarah Williams had been my friend since college, the one person who could match my wit and push me to my limits. We'd lost touch over the years but stayed connected enough to know that she had made a name for herself as a cutthroat lawyer. The kind of woman who could tear apart someone's life with a well-placed legal maneuver and do it with a smile on her face. If anyone could help me ruin Veronica and Thomas, it was her. I called her that afternoon, my hands shaking as I punched in her number. It took 3 rings before she picked up. James, she said, her voice smooth, professional. I didn't expect to hear from you. Sarah, I need your help, I replied, my voice hoarse from a night of sleepless rage. There was a pause on the other end. This sounds serious. Are you okay? No, I said, swallowing hard. I'm not. Veronica's been cheating on me with Thomas. She let out a low whistle. Wow. Didn't see that one coming. What do you want me to do? I want them ruined, I said, surprising myself with the intensity in my voice. I want to make them regret this. Sarah's tone changed, a subtle shift that told me she was taking this seriously now. All right, come to my office. We'll talk. Her office was in a high-rise downtown, a pristine building that screamed wealth and power. I'd barely walked through the door when she greeted me, her sharp eyes taking in the disheveled mess I'd become overnight. You look like hell, she remarked, gesturing for me to sit. Feel like it too, I muttered, sinking into the leather chair across from her desk. She studied me for a moment before speaking. So, you want revenge? That's a dangerous game, James. Dangerous is fine, I snapped. I just want them to pay. Sarah leaned back in her chair, tapping a manicured nail against her desk. All right, let's start with Veronica. What do you know about her finances? I frowned. We have a joint account, but she handles most of the bills. She's always been meticulous about money, making sure everything's in order. Perfect, Sarah said with a sly smile. People who are meticulous usually have secrets. And those secrets are often expensive. She pulled out a notepad, scribbling something down. I'll have my team dig into her financial records, see if she's been hiding anything. What about Thomas? Thomas has always been reckless, I said bitterly. He jumps from one shady business deal to the next, always boasting about how much money he's making. Sarah's eyes gleamed. Excellent. Shady means he's likely to have left a trail. We'll start with his business transactions, find out who he's been dealing with. She paused, her expression turning serious. Are you sure about this, James? Once we start down this path, there's no turning back. I'm sure, I said without hesitation. I want them to hurt the way they hurt me. Sarah nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. All right, then. Let's ruin them. Days turned into weeks, and I threw myself into the process, finding a twisted sense of purpose in dismantling the lives of the two people who had betrayed me. Sarah's team worked quickly, uncovering things about Veronica that made my blood boil. She had been funneling money into a secret account for months, preparing for a life that didn't include me. Thousands of dollars, siphoned away while I was busy trusting her, too blind to see what was right in front of me. She's been moving money in small amounts, Sarah explained one afternoon, handing me a stack of papers. Just enough that you wouldn't notice. But when you add it all up, she's been preparing to leave you for a while, James. I stared at the documents, the reality of it all settling like a weight in my chest. And Thomas? Sarah's smile was sharp. Thomas has been very, very bad. Fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, he's involved in some serious criminal activities. We've handed some of this information over to the authorities, and they're already investigating him. I looked at her, disbelief mingling with a strange sense of satisfaction. You mean, we're going to take him down? Oh, it's already happening, she replied, leaning back in her chair. You just sit back and watch. A week later, the first domino fell. Veronica was called into a meeting at her office and emerged an hour later, pale and shaken. She'd been fired, her company unwilling to risk being associated with her financial improprieties. That evening, she stormed into our house, eyes blazing with anger. How could you? She screamed, throwing a stack of papers at me. You're destroying my life. You destroyed it, I shot back, my voice cold. You did this to yourself, Veronica. Tears filled her eyes, but I felt nothing. Is this what you want? To ruin me? I want you to feel what I felt, I replied, my voice trembling with barely restrained fury. I want you to know what it's like to have everything you've built torn apart. James, please, she whispered, her voice breaking. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, I said flatly, turning my back on her. You made your choice. Thomas, on the other hand, was less composed. He showed up at my office one afternoon, his face flushed with anger, eyes wild with desperation. James, we need to talk, he said, slamming his hand down on my desk. There's nothing to talk about, I replied calmly, leaning back in my chair. You brought this on yourself. You can't do this to me, he growled. Your family. I laughed, shaking my head. You slept with my wife, Thomas. You think I owe you loyalty? He stood there, fists clenched, his body trembling with rage. You're going to regret this, he spat, turning on his heel and storming out of my office. I watched him go, a strange sense of peace washing over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control. I didn't care about the cost, the consequences, or the fallout. All that mattered was that I was finally the one calling the shots. The fallout came swiftly, like a storm brewing on the horizon that I'd only half prepared for. Veronica had lost her job, her reputation tarnished. Friends and colleagues whispered behind her back, casting sidelong glances whenever she entered a room. I expected her to lash out, to confront me, but instead, she retreated into herself. Each day, I found her sitting in silence, staring at the wall, her once vibrant spirit dampened by the weight of her actions. One evening, I returned home to find Veronica on the couch, her hair tied up in a messy bun, wearing an old sweatshirt that hung loosely off her frame. She looked small and defeated. The television flickered in the background, but she wasn't watching it. Hey, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral as I tossed my keys onto the counter. You all right? Do I look all right? She shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I just lost my job and my dignity. But sure, let's pretend everything is fine. I sighed, raking a hand through my hair. You know this is your fault, right? You could have stopped all of this before it escalated. Oh, please. You think you're the innocent victim in all of this? She stood up, her anger igniting. You're the one who brought Sarah into it, who decided to play the game of revenge. You've ruined everything. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. You ruined everything the moment you decided to sleep with my cousin. I'm just making sure you both face the consequences. Consequences, she echoed incredulously. What, you mean my consequences? What about Thomas? You're the one who had him investigated. You're the one who got him caught up in all of this. Don't try to spin this, I replied, my voice rising. He's the one who has been scamming people and breaking the law. I just gave them the information they needed. And look where that's gotten you, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, heavy with sorrow. Is this really who you want to be? The question hung in the air, a challenge I wasn't ready to confront. I don't care about that right now, I said, avoiding her gaze. I care about getting justice. Justice, she scoffed. This is just vengeance dressed up as justice, and it's making you a monster. I didn't respond, too caught up in my own swirling emotions. I stormed out of the room, needing to escape her words. A few days later, the storm I had set in motion hit its peak. I was in my office when I received a call from Sarah. James, you need to sit down, she said, her tone grave. It's about Thomas. What happened? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. He was found dead this morning, she replied. It looks like it was a suicide. My world tilted on its axis. No. No way. You're lying. I wish I were, she said softly. He was found in his car, the engine running in his garage. There was a note. I felt the air leave my lungs. The weight of what I had done crashed down on me like a wave, dragging me under. A note? What did it say? From what I understand, he mentioned the pressure of everything getting to him, she explained, her voice steady but laced with concern. He felt trapped by the situation and believed he had no way out. God. I didn't mean for it to go this far, I whispered, staring blankly at the wall in front of me. This is my fault. James, you didn't force him to do anything, Sarah said firmly. He made his own choices. But if you're feeling this way, you need to take a step back. No, I said, shaking my head, anger igniting again. I'm not stepping back. I have to confront this head-on. I owe it to him, to myself. The funeral was a muted affair, attended by a scattering of family members and friends who had once rallied around Thomas. I stood in the back, watching as Veronica broke down, her sobs echoing through the small chapel. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, guilt, but mostly, I felt numb. After the service, I found myself standing outside, the crisp air biting at my skin. I lit a cigarette, the smoke curling up into the sky as I took deep breaths to steady myself. James, a voice called out. I turned to see Veronica approaching, her face red and puffy from crying. What do you want? I asked, my tone icy. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. About everything. I never meant for any of this to happen, really? I replied, my voice dripping with skepticism. Because it seems like you were pretty invested in your affair. Where was the remorse then? I was wrong, she insisted, tears spilling down her cheeks. But I never wanted Thomas to die. I'm so confused about everything. I didn't think it would lead to this. It doesn't matter what you thought, I shot back, anger boiling inside me. What matters is that you destroyed everything we had. You brought this into our lives. I know. I know. And I'm trying to make sense of it, she cried, her hands shaking. But it's too late now. What are we going to do? How do we move on from this? Maybe you should have thought about that before you slept with him, I snapped, taking a step back. This is all your mess, Veronica. You wanted excitement, and now look where we are. Look, I didn't come here to fight, she said, her voice breaking. I just wanted to talk. I'm scared. I feel lost. I hesitated, the anger slowly draining from my body, replaced by a hollow sense of defeat. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice quieter. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe just a chance to explain. I didn't think Thomas would become so reckless. I never thought he'd hurt anyone. Neither did I murmured, the reality of our situation weighing heavily on me. But he did, and now it's too late. She nodded slowly, her expression shifting to one of resignation. So what now? Are we just supposed to go on like nothing happened? I looked away, grappling with the reality of our lives that had been shattered. I don't know, I said finally. I don't know if I can forgive you. Or if I even want to try. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words and unresolved pain. For the first time since everything had begun, I felt lost too, trapped in a situation I never wanted to be in, with no clear path forward. All I knew was that revenge hadn't brought me the closure I sought, it had only left me with more questions and deeper scars. As I walked away from her, the reality settled in. The fallout wasn't just about Veronica and Thomas, it was about me and the choices I'd made. I had to face the consequences of my actions and begin to seek a way out of the darkness I'd willingly stepped into. It was time to find a different path, one that didn't lead to more destruction but perhaps to healing and a glimmer of hope. The weeks that followed Thomas's funeral were a blur of emotions and unsettling realizations. Veronica and I moved through the house like ghosts, each of us haunted by our own thoughts. The silence between us was suffocating, punctuated only by the occasional sound of a door creaking or the refrigerator humming. It felt surreal, as if the world had stopped spinning while we grappled with the wreckage of our lives. I found myself avoiding her more often than not, spending late nights at work and weekends in solitude. The distractions helped, but they also left me feeling more isolated. Guilt gnawed at me, a constant reminder that my quest for revenge had led to something irreversible. One evening, after coming home late from another grueling day at the office, I found Veronica sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a cup of cold coffee. The sight struck me, and for a moment, I hesitated at the door. "James," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my anger still lingering beneath the surface. "What's there to talk about?" I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. "We've already said everything we needed to say." "Maybe we haven't," she countered, her eyes searching mine for some semblance of understanding. "I don't want to keep living like this. It feels like we're just waiting for something to change when we both know it won't." I stepped further into the kitchen, crossing my arms defensively. "What do you expect me to do? Pretend like everything is fine? You tore our lives apart, Veronica. I don't know how to forgive you for that." "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "But I want to try to understand. We're both hurting, and if we're going to get through this, we need to talk about it, about us." The tension in the room thickened, and for a moment, I almost softened. "What's there to understand? You made your choices. You knew what you were doing." "James," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm not trying to justify my actions. I know I messed up. But I want to take responsibility. I want to make things right, if that's even possible, right?" I scoffed, incredulous. "You think you can just say a few words and everything will go back to normal? It doesn't work like that." "I know it doesn't," she exclaimed, frustration spilling over. "But I don't want to keep feeling like this. I can't live in this kind of pain anymore, and I don't think you can either." The truth in her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I was tired of this agony, of the endless cycle of anger and guilt. "What do you want from me, then?" I asked, my voice dropping to a quieter, more vulnerable tone. "What do we do next? Maybe we can find a way to move forward, together," she suggested, her eyes hopeful. "We can seek counseling, figure this out. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." I looked at her, my heart racing. The idea of counseling made my stomach twist. But a part of me recognized that this was a necessary step. I don't know if I can trust you again, I admitted. Veronica nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering. Trust takes time. I get that. But I promise to be open and honest with you. I'm willing to work for it. The sincerity in her eyes stirred something deep within me, an ember of hope, perhaps. Fine, I said, my voice shaky. We can try counseling. But if you betray my trust again, there won't be a second chance. Agreed, she replied, relief flooding her features. Thank you, James. As the days turned into weeks, we started attending couples therapy. Each session peeled back layers of resentment and pain, forcing us to confront the raw truth of our situation. Dr. Reynolds, our therapist, was a steady presence, guiding us through our emotions. James, what do you feel when you think about Thomas's death? She asked one afternoon, her voice calm and soothing. I swallowed hard, the memories flooding back. I feel responsible, I admitted, my voice breaking. I wanted revenge, and now, he's gone. I didn't want this. That's a heavy burden to carry, Dr. Reynolds replied, nodding. It's important to recognize that you cannot control the choices of others, even if they're connected to your pain. Veronica reached out, placing her hand over mine. I never wanted him to die either, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I can't believe what my choices have led to. I know you didn't intend for it to go this far, I said, my gaze fixed on our joined hands. But the consequences are real, and they affect both of us. Maybe facing this together is the first step toward healing, Dr. Reynolds suggested, her eyes kind. You both are acknowledging the impact of your actions, and that's progress. As therapy continued, we began to uncover the deeper issues that had led Veronica to her choices, the emptiness she felt in our marriage, the disconnection that had grown between us. It was painful, but necessary. One evening, after a particularly intense session, we returned home feeling emotionally drained. I poured us both a glass of wine, and we sat together on the couch, the weight of our conversation still heavy in the air. Do you think we can ever really come back from this? Veronica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I think we can, I replied, feeling more certain than I had in weeks. But it's going to take time. We have to rebuild trust from the ground up. I'm willing to put in the work, she said, her eyes earnest. I just want a chance to make things right. And I want to believe you, I admitted, but I need to see it in action. Words aren't enough anymore. I get that, she said, nodding. I'll show you. I promise. As the weeks turned into months, our relationship began to shift slowly. We found ways to communicate better, and while it was far from easy, there was an emerging sense of hope. We started going on walks together, rediscovering the simple joys of companionship. Laughter began to fill the gaps that had once been overshadowed by pain. One night, after a long day, we decided to cook dinner together. It was a simple meal, but the act of working side by side felt significant. As we chopped vegetables, I glanced over at her and smiled. You know, I said, stirring the sauce, I never thought I'd be here, cooking dinner with you again. Neither did I, she admitted, a soft smile breaking across her face. But it feels nice, doesn't it? Yeah, it does, I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me. I still think about everything that happened, but I'm learning to let it go. That's all we can do, she said, her eyes bright. Keep moving forward. And in that moment, I realized I was beginning to believe it too. The scars would always remain, reminders of our journey, but perhaps they would serve as a foundation for a stronger relationship. One sunny afternoon, I found myself at Thomas's gravesite, standing alone with a bouquet of wildflowers. I placed them gently on the stone, feeling a rush of emotions flood over me. I took a deep breath, summoning the courage to speak. Thomas, I'm sorry for everything, I said, my voice cracking. I didn't want it to end like this. I never wanted to hurt you. I hope you can find peace wherever you are. I closed my eyes, allowing the warmth of the sun to wash over me. It felt like a release, a letting go of the anger and bitterness that had consumed me. The desire for revenge had only led to loss, and I wanted to embrace healing instead. As I walked away from the gravesite, I felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. I was ready to embrace the new beginning that lay ahead, not just for myself, but for Veronica too. We had both suffered, but we also had the chance to grow and change. And with that thought, I stepped into the sunlight, ready to face whatever came next, together.